Okay, so we're just going to go over how to fill out a listing agreement. You're going to load your listing agreement and it's going to be fillable. Okay, if you notice on the left side of your agreement, there are numbers for each line and there are asterisks. The asterisks obviously indicate that this is a very required or highly recommended field that needs to be completed to make this completely legal and fully executed. When you're filling this out in the seller box, the seller's name needs to be exactly the way it is on the deed. The deed will reflect how many sellers, and if there are more than one, you will have to put everyone's name on there. Spelt exactly the same, even if it's Steven, but they go by Steve, it has to be the way it is on the deed, okay? Line 3 is the brokerage. It says broker. It does not mean Vicki Morrison. It means Bricks and Mortar Real Estate and Development. This is a listing that you have gotten on your own and that you are working, but all listings belong to the brokerage. So then down here on line 6, you're in the exclusive right to sell listing agreement. And this property section wants to know when the listing agreement begins and when does it expire or terminate. In most cases, the listing begin date is the date of the agreement. So if you're at a listing appointment, you're going to probably put the date of their agreement. And we usually have ours run for 6 months. I would be cautious and just remember when it's going to terminate so that if it's not sold within that time period, that then you can, relist it or extend the terms. Down here on section 12, the description of the property, several different sections, obviously the street address. Then the legal description. The legal description is found on the property card. It could also be found on the deed. You should copy it directly and paste it here to make sure that it is not entered incorrectly or that there are no errors. If it is a super lengthy one and there is not enough room for the legal description, then you're going to want to mark C attachment and then attach it to this file, or at least have it in the loop, which is a requirement anyways. Personal property, including appliances, everything that's going to be included in the sale. Have that discussion with your client. Will the refrigerator that's existing in the property be the same one that you're including in the sale? All the kitchen appliances, washer and dryer, pool equipment, a water treatment system, anything above and beyond that's not normal or fixed or attached to the property, please make sure it's included. Is the property currently occupied by a tenant? If it is, when does the lease term expire? Complete line 20. Then we're going down to section 3, price and terms. The property is offered for sale on the following terms and no other acceptable terms. Or on other terms acceptable to the seller, excuse me. So obviously you're going to put the listing price. This is the price that you guys have agreed to the listing to go live. Financing terms. In most cases, homes that are well established and livable will qualify for any of the loan types, but there may be an incident when the seller doesn't want to work with an FHA buyer or the seller doesn't want a VA loan. And in that case, you would remove that. Or if the home won't finance for some reason because of a certain situation with the home, then you want to make sure you don't mark. But this is the seller giving you permission, like what are we willing to accept? If the seller is willing to own or finance the property, then this section would be filled out as well. The other sections, you notice the asterisks are minimal. It's important to understand how to explain these to your clients. Multiple listing service, what is it? How does it distribute? Things like that. Read it to them verbatim, and then if they have questions, try to address it, but do not try to interpret it differently than it's read. The broker authority, the seller, line item 49, section 6, broker authority. Seller authorizes the broker to market the property to the public. I think that's a given. If you come down here in this section, there's a checkbox here. Display the property on the internet except the street address. If you mark this, then that means when you go into inputting the listing, that means you have to exclude the listing address. And that's like a no-go. We always need the address. So it's not typical to have this marked. No, not publicly market to the public. The seller does not authorize the broker to display the property on MLS. This is not a typical thing. This is a special condition here, these two boxes. If you leave them open, the seller still needs to initial that they are unmarked. If they are marked, the seller still needs to initial that they are in agreement with whatever is in this section, okay? Further down, it's section E. Are you going to be using a lockbox system to show and access the property? Yes or no? The seller agrees that the lockbox is for the seller's benefit and releases the broker or persons working through the broker and the broker's local realtor board from any connection to damages or losses. Withhold verbal offers. So for me, Vicki always taught me that if you have a verbal offer and someone's not willing to sign on a contract or send proof of funds or a pre-approval or anything like that, that it's not wise to recommend it to your seller or to present it to your seller because, you know, what if that buyer disappears? They could not be serious or something like that. So have a discussion with your sellers about whether or not they want written offers or verbal offers. If they only want written offers, then you're going to mark that you are allowed to withhold verbal offers. The reason why this is important is because if another realtor presents an email offer without a contract, or if they text it to you, or if they even say it to you verbally, you are inclined as a Florida realtor to present all offers. In the incident that you are having this section marked withhold verbal offers, then here you go. You're protected and you can say, my seller wishes to have things presented on a contract. Please send it over. Withholding offers once the seller accepts a sales contract for property. You would have to mark that if that's what they want, but I always recommend to work on backup offers. So that's completely up to you and the seller. Virtual office websites, what this is meaning is that the seller authorizes the automated estimate of the property value. So like example would be like Zillow, how they have the values on there. If they want that to be present, then you can, leave it unmarked. But I would recommend that we don't authorize the automated estimate. We don't want Zillow's numbers sitting right beside our listing price. Also, third-party comments. So typically I mark both of these, and then that affects how I put my listing together in MLS. It's super important to go through all of section 7 with your seller, just verbally. Help them understand what they are agreeing to as a seller. Providing keys to the property, informing us if there's a new mortgage or a lease that they've incurred. They're definitely holding us harmless for anything that could happen on the property. And just go through this and read this to them. Section 8, compensation. This is a super important section to make sure it's filled out correctly and that you are explaining it to your clients as well. Read through it and be sure that it is accurate. Most of the time, line item 109 with the asterisk, section 8, the percentage of the total purchase price. So right now, the common percentage to the for compensation is like about 5% or 6%. And then you have your transaction fee right here. So you're going to fill that in. Down here in section 9, it talks about the breakdown, okay? So don't put 3% up here or 2.5%. Please put 6% or 5% in its entirety. You'll have a chance to explain the breakdown further down here. All right, so broker's fee is due in the following circumstances. This is a great paragraph to go over with your clients. If the property is transferred by sale, lease, exchange, bankruptcy, or anything else. That means if it's sold or whatever, we still get compensated. If the seller refuses or fails to sign an offer at the price and terms stated in this agreement, so what this is saying is if you and the seller have an agreement that you're going to sell the house for $300,000 with no contingencies or no, discounts, and they won't sign it, then the brokerage could push that we did our job and that compensation is required. If within section 3 right here, if within so many days after termination date, which is considered like, this is like the protection period, if you procured any type of transaction and it didn't happen, and then the transaction or the listing agreement expired, but yet the transaction continued without you, then the brokerage is still due their compensation. Excuse me. So I typically put 120 days or 180 days, so 3 months or 6 months. Retained deposits as consideration for broker services. The broker is entitled to receive, if left blank, 50% of all deposits that the seller retains as liquidated damages for the buyer's default in a transaction. An example of what this means is a buyer fell out of contract. They are not able to get their escrow deposit back. Their escrow was $5,000 and it is due to the seller. Then the seller gets $2,500 and the brokerage gets $2,500. All right, so section 9 is where you break down the differences. Typically, I always mark, like if it's a 6% up at the top, then obviously it's 3% on all the splits, except for a no brokerage relationship. So there is some talk about how sometimes listing agents will take 4% and offer 2% to the buyer side. Our brokerage does not approve of that type of business. We split our commissions 50-50, okay? Brokerage relationship, conditional termination, dispute resolution, miscellaneous section, all need to be reviewed in their entirety to make sure that everybody understands what the agreement is. If the seller says, I've already read through it, I'm comfortable, then you just move on, but just say it's important that we go over these things. In section 11, where it says seller must sign a withdrawal agreement, reimburse the broker for all direct expenses incurred in marketing of the property, and pay a cancellation fee of this plus the tax. We typically do not charge a cancellation fee, but it's important to know that if you have incurred marketing expenses and the seller decides to cancel, then you are due your marketing expense back. So if you paid a high amount of money or any amount of money for professional photos or staging or anything like that, and the seller decides to cancel or changes their mind, or for whatever reason, they don't necessarily owe you a cancellation fee per what our brokerage, prefers as the type of business that we do, but we do expect them to pay, and it is contractual that they would have to pay the marketing expenses back. It is up to you to have a conversation with your broker about enforcing that. If we go further down, additional terms, this is where I like to be really specific about things. So let's say I recommended a certain price point, but my seller wants a different price point. I will kind of note in here, listing agent suggested price point of this much to this point. We are happy to continue with the listing at this price point upon the seller's request. Yada, yada. I like to put it in there just because sometimes people forget. People forget that, hey, it didn't sell at what you wanted, but it sold at what I recommended. And they think that, maybe that's something that you did wrong or whatever. So I like to just put it in writing. Sometimes you can come up with a plan like, hey, we're going to leave it at this price point for so many weeks. And if no showings, everybody agrees, to reduce it by this amount of money. So anything like that. Also, if there's anything that's going to be excluded from the listing, like there's a shed that is not included because it could be, put on a trailer and moved, right? Shed is excluded from the property sale. Or if there's anything else that needs to be excluded or any special terms, then this is where you're going to put that. Be very careful how you write things out. Terminology in contracts and agreements are very specific and very bindable, so you want to be clear on what it is that you're trying to relay. Always down here, you want to fill out as much of the information as possible, and you are authorized to sign for this. Make sure that everything is presented on here as far as the brokerage name, address, and phone number, and then have them be sure to initial down at the bottom as well. Don't forget, whenever you send this for signature, if you attach a PDF copy, then you have now returned a version of this to them and it stays in their email. So that's important to do because you've then taken care of section 191. And if you've done it through dotloop, which you will have for electronic signatures, then we have evidence of it and time and date stamps and so forth. So this is how your listing agreement should, look and be filled out. If you have any direct questions or special circumstances, please reach out to your mentor or your ASM within your office. I'm always available for education questions. Feel free to email me, text me, or call me. I hope you guys have a great day.